Welcome to this evening's performance of Damascus Night by the Storytellers. We would like to dedicate this performance to little Aylan Kurdi, age 3, found on the beaches of Turkey. It's him and about 10,000 other Syrian children who have lost their lives in this brutal war.
Good evening, everyone. This is really a great privilege for us to perform here at Gyaan Adab. It's something that we've been looking forward to for a long time. One is because I really like the ambience this place has, and it brings together a very great audience at every one of the programs that we've seen in the past.
Damascus had its fair share of unique and unusual people, but no one more unusual than Salim the Coachman, a short and slight man with a deep, warm voice that made him seem larger and more broad-shouldered than he really was. But that's not why Salim was unusual or unique. Salim was a gifted storyteller. Salim had a silver voice. His voice held everyone in thrall, for he could make you feel the sun, the wind, and the rain through his voice. He could soar over mountains and valleys like the swallow, or streak through the 7 seas like a baby dolphin. And when he grew tired, he'd sit on Mount Ararat. Nowhere else would do. And he would smoke his water pipe. So that is why when on a hot August night, Salim suddenly lost his voice, not even his best friends could believe it.
Listen carefully. I am your good fairy, the one who breathed life into your dusty wooden worlds and made them grow into a magical tree of tales. Do you think you could have told stories so well if I hadn't been standing steadfast by your side for over 60 years? You are beyond all doubt the best storyteller in Damascus. But every now and then, you go a little too far. You box yourself in so badly with all your subplots and digressions, you forget which story you're telling. Remember that story about how you saved the Mexican fisherman? You've told that story 300 times. But every time, you're so taken by your own victory over the octopus, you forget you were actually on your way to Cuba to fetch the black pearls to save the princess. How many times I've had to pick up where you lost the thread. It was often exhausting, but it made me happy to see a smile in your heart. Those were hard days of labor, my friend. And now, just like you, I too have grown old and grey, and I'm ready to retire. But when I do, Salim, when I do, you will lose your voice. I've always loved you, Salim. Your words tickle my heart like a little feather. So I asked the fairy king for a special favor, which he granted. He heard what I had to say and laughed. Yes, you've always been in love with that funny coachman of yours, haven't you? Well then, go and tell him our one condition.
Condition? Now what condition?
Salim, I beg of you. After that question, you have only 21 words left. Then you will become mute. Now, listen carefully. If you receive 7 unique gifts within 3 months, then a young fairy will stand by your side and take my place. She will release your tongue from silence, and you can go on telling stories till your dying day. You will have to discover those gifts for yourself. The fairy king didn't even tell me what they might be. Don't squander your words, Salim, my beloved. Words are responsibility. Consider carefully what you want to say You have only 21 words left.
Salim the Coachman, molded as he was in the ancient customs of Damascus, never for a moment thought any price final or any offer written in stone.
Only 21 words?
No, it's only 18!
And now Salim had only 18 words. But his friends were so wrought by their friend Salim's condition that they began to think of all sorts of ways in which to help their friend Salim regain his voice. What do you think Salim would need to help him regain his voice? Any ideas? Salim, the gifted storyteller, would need the gift of 7 stories. So here are the stories. Let's hear them.
So good evening. It's a fine evening for storytelling. And my story begins the way all stories begin. Do you remember how stories begin? Would you say that a little loudly, please?
Once upon a time.
There was a man named Shafaq. Now, Shafaq was a gifted storyteller, much like our friend Salim. And Shafaq earned a living by telling stories, possibly in places like Gyaan Adab, in the loft, in Bagdandi. And as you can imagine, he didn't make much money. In fact, he lived quite a desperate existence.
I was one of 10 children. My father was a poor stonemason. We lived in this little hut. We slept 10 to a room. Each morning, my father would be up early and along with my older brothers would go off to the building site where he worked. As for my mother and three older sisters, we worked in a field. Now, since we were so poor, we hardly had any education. Naturally, we were very poor. They couldn't afford schools for us. So my father enlisted the services of an imam. Now, this imam was very strict, as you can very well imagine. He kicked us, he beat us. We couldn't tolerate it much longer. And like my brothers before me, I too left after 2 years. My father was very, very disappointed.
I spent more than 30 years in America. But none of you ever asked me the circumstances under which I left Latika to go there. My story starts at the time of the First World War. I was a mere 18 years old then.
Come, Tuma. You must have been closer to 28.
Okay, let's call it 20. Anyway, it was the summer of 1916. And I was on the run from members of the Ottoman regime. And there were about 25 of us concealed in the huts of the fishermen along the coastline. And early one cold, grey morning, someone alerted us that the soldiers knew where we were. And so I made a dash for a nearby cliff.
Friends, I've spent 12 years in prison. Yeah, 12 years in solitary, 12 years in prison for a crime that I never ever committed. Well, it's all because of this guy named Ismail. Ismail, definitely a devil in disguise. He convinced my cousin and me that the courtyard where my cousin is currently staying, there's a treasure hidden in the same courtyard. Why? Because he used to serve an officer of the Ottoman regiment, empire, few years back, and he was convinced that there's a treasure hidden in the same courtyard. Fair enough. So we decided, the three of us, Ismail, my cousin and me, that we will dig the treasure, we'll find it out, and then equally divide it between the three of us. Sounded like a good plan. But first, we decided that we'll meet in the famous market, the Kia.
So, do you think all storytellers are liars? Well, we are, right? And of course, sometimes people like Tuma claim that some true stories are, they come up with some lies and claim that they are true. But yet, most times, storytellers can use lies to actually tell the truth. So let me tell you a story about lies. Once upon a time, there was a king in Damascus. There were many kings. This king was now growing very old and he was on his deathbed. So he called for his only son, Prince Sadek. And in a weak voice, he told his son, "My dear son, in a short while, I am going to knock on that door that opens but once. And you are going to inherit this mighty kingdom. It is your duty as king to take care of your people. Be just and be fair.
Makes us lose our appetite. But I wonder, what are these things called stories? Why are they so powerful? Why do they speak to us in so many voices? Or are all these stories just narratives in search of a voice, like our friend Salim? A long time ago, when I was minister, an old man used to bring me coffee every morning. And just for the fun of it, he'd tell me a story. But I never really listened. I think people in positions of power very soon lose the ability to listen. He told me the story once about this king. Yes, this poor, sad king. A long time ago, a young prince came to the throne and took for a queen a most beautiful woman. Her beauty, they said, would put the roses of Damascus to shame. In time, a child...
My name is Fatima, and I'm here today to tell you a story on behalf of my brave husband, Ali. I'm here today to tell you a story about Laila, a magical woman storyteller. Laila was very small when her parents died. She went to live with her grandparents in a village in Yemen, famous for its brown mountains and coffee. Whenever Laila missed her mother, she would go into the village and listen to stories. She would keep these stories in her heart. While the other girls busied themselves with their face and putting on interesting dresses for the boys to get attracted to, Laila was busy listening to stories. She was almost like a beloved Sufi saint, in love with her stories, always chasing stories, listening to them. And soon enough, she became a good storyteller. They say, so magical was her tongue, that one day when she told a story to a rotten tree, green leaves began to grow on it. She could communicate with the stars, the clouds, the moon. In fact, one day when there was a drought in the village, Laila managed to bring the clouds down in the form of rain.
Thank you, friends. Thank you for your wonderful stories. I have my voice back. I hope none of you ever lose your voice, your ability to speak, to heal, to communicate. And if you all do, may you all have wonderful friends like these to help you get back. Thank you. Thank you.